It was a warm afternoon when everything shifted again. The kind of afternoon where the heat wrapped itself around everything, slowing movement, dulling sound. Amara stood behind her counter, fanning herself lightly with a folded piece of cardboard between customers. Business had been steady. Not overwhelming, but good. She had just finished attending to a customer when the atmosphere changed. Subtly, but noticeably. A car had pulled up. Not unusual on its own, but this one was different. Sleek, polished. The kind that didn't belong to this street, didn't blend into the dust and everyday noise. It stood out without trying. Amara noticed. Of course she did, but she didn't stare. She had learned not to. The door opened, and then the woman stepped out. Everything about her was deliberate. From the way her heels touched the ground confident, measured to the way she adjusted her posture as she closed the car door behind her. She wore designer clothing that fit her perfectly, tailored to emphasize every curve of her hourglass figure without looking excessive. Her hair fell to the middle of her back, thick, healthy, styled in a way that spoke of both effort and ease. She wore sunglasses, large, expensive, shielding her eyes completely. And yet, even without seeing them, there was something in her presence that felt assessing, calculating. She walked toward the store, not hurried, not hesitant. Amara straightened slightly, her instincts sharpening. The woman stepped inside. For a moment, she said nothing. She simply stood there, removing her sunglasses slowly, revealing sharp, observant eyes that scanned the space in a single, efficient sweep. The shelves, the goods, the structure, and finally, Amara. There was no warmth in her gaze, no curiosity beyond what was necessary, just evaluation. She had learned not to. "Good afternoon," Amara said, her voice polite but steady. The woman gave a small nod. "Afternoon," she replied, her tone neutral, almost uninterested. There was no smile, no attempt at friendliness, just acknowledgement. And then, without hesitation, without pretense, she stepped closer to the counter.
Good afternoon and welcome. Afternoon. Where is Tunde?
"I'm looking for someone," she said. Amara's fingers stilled slightly against the surface of the wood. "Okay," she replied carefully. The woman placed her sunglasses gently on the counter, her movements controlled, precise. "Has a man named Tunde been around here?" The name landed heavier than it should have. Amara didn't react immediately. She couldn't, because in that single moment, 1,000 small thoughts collided in her mind. How does she know him? Who is she? Why is she asking here? But outwardly, she remained composed. Her expression didn't change much, but there was a subtle shift, a tightening, a quiet alertness. "Yes," she said slowly. "He comes here." The woman nodded once. No surprise. No reaction. As if that answer had been expected. "Good," she said. That was it. No follow-up question. No explanation. No acknowledgement of what that might mean. She simply stood there, waiting. Not impatient in the obvious sense, but in a way that suggested her time was more valuable than this moment, and she had already decided how much of it she was willing to spend. Amara felt it, that imbalance, that quiet dismissal. The woman's gaze drifted slightly, not out of distraction, but disinterest, as if the environment itself required no further attention. Amara swallowed lightly. Do you want me to call him? She asked. The woman looked back at her. Yes. No, please. No softening. Just expectation. Amara hesitated for the briefest moment. Not enough to be noticeable, but enough for her to feel it. Then she nodded. Okay. She reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over Tunde's contact for a second longer than usual. Something didn't feel right. She couldn't explain it. There was nothing concrete, nothing obvious. Just a quiet, persistent unease settling in her chest. But she pressed the call button anyway. As the phone rang, the silence in the store stretched. The woman remained where she was, posture perfect, expression unchanged. She didn't fidget, didn't speak, didn't offer anything more than her presence. Waiting, watching. Amara turned slightly away, the phone pressed to her ear. But she could still feel it, that gaze, steady and unyielding, even when it wasn't directly on her. Tunde picked up. Amara? Her voice came out softer than she expected. Someone is here asking for you, she said. A pause. Who? Amara glanced briefly at the woman. She didn't say, she replied. But she seems to know you. Another pause. I see, Tunde said quietly. Amara's grip on the phone tightened slightly. Should I tell her anything? There was something in the air now, something shifting, something that hadn't been there before. No, he said finally. I'm on my way. The call ended. Amara lowered the phone slowly. She turned back toward the counter. The woman hadn't moved. Is he coming? She asked. Yes, Amara replied. The woman nodded once, and then she waited. Just as she had from the moment she walked in. Unbothered, unimpressed, as if everything was already unfolding exactly the way she expected it to. And as Amara stood there, behind the counter she had built with her own hands, in the life she had fought so hard to create, she felt it, clearer now than ever before. That quiet voice, the one she had ignored, the one that had warned her from the very beginning. Something was wrong, and whatever was about to happen would not be simple. The 10 minutes felt longer than they should have. Time, which usually slipped past Amara unnoticed when she was working, now dragged its feet deliberately, as if it too was waiting to see what would happen next. The woman had not moved much. She stood near the counter, occasionally shifting her weight ever so slightly. Her posture still flawless. Her presence still composed. Once, she picked up a small item from the shelf, turning it over in her hand, not out of curiosity, but more like she was passing time in a space she did not intend to truly engage with. Amara, on the other hand, felt every second. She tried to continue as normal, serving the occasional customer, adjusting items, but her awareness never left the woman. It lingered at the edge of her focus, like a shadow that refused to disappear. There was something about her, not just her appearance, though. That alone was enough to draw attention. It was the certainty she carried, the quiet confidence of someone who expected things to go her way, who moved through the world without needing permission, and it unsettled Amara in a way she didn't like. Then a car pulled up. Amara didn't need to look to know it was him, but she did anyway. The same familiar vehicle came to a smooth stop outside the store, its presence now something she recognized instantly. Her chest tightened, not with the warmth she had grown used to, but with something more complicated. Anticipation, unease, both at once. The engine cut, the door opened, and a moment later, Tunde stepped out. He moved with purpose. Not rushed, but not casual either. There was something in his stride that suggested awareness, readiness, perhaps even tension. Amara noticed. Of course she did. He reached the entrance and stepped inside. And then he stopped. Completely.
Sade!
Tunde!
As if the air had been knocked out of him in a single, silent blow. For the first time since Amara had known him, Tunde looked caught off guard. Truly caught off guard. His eyes locked onto the woman, and for a brief moment, just a flicker, something unreadable passed through his expression. Surprise. Recognition. Something deeper. Then, Tunde! The woman's voice broke through the stillness, no longer cold or indifferent. It was bright, warm, alive in a way it hadn't been before. She turned fully toward him, and in that instant, her entire demeanor transformed. The sharp, composed figure who had walked into the store was gone, replaced by someone openly joyful, almost radiant. Without hesitation, without even a glance at the heels she wore, she moved. Quickly, confidently. She closed the distance between them in seconds and threw her arms around him, tightly, as if she had been waiting a long time for this moment. Tunde! Oh my God! She laughed softly, the sound full and genuine now. Look at you! For a split second, Tunde remained still. Then he smiled, and it was real. Not the polite, measured smile he gave strangers. Not the soft, controlled one he often gave Amara when he was thinking. This was different. Broader. Familiar. He wrapped his arms around her in return. It's been a while, he said. Amara watched. She didn't move, didn't speak. She simply observed every detail, the ease of the embrace, the way they fit into each other's space without hesitation, the history that was clearly there, unspoken but undeniable. After a moment, the woman pulled back, though her hands lingered on his arms as if confirming he was real. You disappeared, she said, her tone half teasing, half accusing. Do you know how hard it was to find you? Tunde exhaled softly, a small chuckle escaping him. I didn't disappear. You did, she insisted lightly. You just didn't realize it. Their familiarity filled the room. It wasn't loud, but it was present, strong enough that Amara could feel it from where she stood. And then, as if suddenly remembering Tunde, glanced toward her. There was a shift. Subtle, but real. He stepped slightly back, creating space not just physically, but contextually. A transition from one part of his world to another. Amara, he said. Her name grounded the moment. She stepped forward slowly, her expression composed, her posture steady. This is, he paused briefly, as if deciding how to frame it, a childhood friend of mine. The woman turned toward Amara again, and just like before, the warmth didn't fully follow. Her smile remained, but it changed. Softer at the edges, less genuine, measured. Hi, she said. Amara returned the smile. Hello, she replied. Outwardly, there was nothing wrong. Nothing anyone could point to and say, this is where the tension began. But internally, Amara felt it. Clear as day. Something about the woman didn't sit right with her. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was instinct, the same instinct that had carried her through years of uncertainty, that had taught her when to trust and when to step back. And right now, it was speaking. Quietly, firmly. This one will bring trouble, Tunde continued, his tone easy, unaware, or perhaps choosing not to acknowledge the undercurrent in the room. "And this," he said, turning slightly toward Amara, "is Amara." There was a brief pause, a small window where meaning could have been clarified, defined. But it wasn't. He didn't say more, didn't explain, didn't label. And somehow, that silence said more than words could have. The woman's eyes flickered briefly between them, observing, calculating. Then she smiled again. "Nice to meet you," she said. Amara nodded. "You too." Their voices were polite, their expressions calm, but beneath it, something had shifted, irreversibly, because as Amara stood there, looking at this woman who had walked into her space, into her life, into his life, so effortlessly, she knew, without needing proof, without needing explanation, this was not a simple visit. This was not a harmless reunion. This was the beginning of something else. Something complicated. Something disruptive. Something that would test everything she had built. Not just her business, not just her stability, but her heart. And as Tunde stood between them, unaware of the quiet storm forming beneath the surface, Amara realized something else. For the first time in a long time, she felt uncertain. Not about herself, but about him. The weeks that followed did not explode into chaos. They unraveled. Quietly. So quietly, in fact, that if Amara had not been who she was, if she had not been raised in a life where survival depended on noticing the smallest shifts, she might have missed it entirely. But Amara was not careless, and she was not blind. The woman's name was Sade. Amara learned it the same day she met her, spoken casually by Tunde in a tone that carried familiarity without explanation. "Sade," he had said, as though that alone was enough to define everything she needed to know. And maybe for him it was. But not for Amara, because names, to her, meant nothing without understanding the weight behind them. And Sade carried weight. At first, things appeared normal. On the surface, nothing had changed. Tunde still visited. He still called. He still smiled at her, the way he always had. But there was something different now. Something subtle. Something that didn't belong. It began with time. Time something Tunde had once given freely became inconsistent. "I'll come by later," he would say. And sometimes he did. But sometimes he didn't. Or he would arrive late, his presence slightly distracted, his attention split in a way that hadn't been there before. At first, Amara said nothing. Because life happened. Because people got busy. Because she trusted him. But then she noticed the pattern. And patterns told stories. Sade was always there. Not physically, not always, but present in ways that were hard to ignore. Her name would come up casually. "Oh, Sade," mentioned something like that. "I was with Sade earlier. Sade needed help with something." At first, it sounded harmless. Natural, even. Childhood friends reconnecting after years apart. But it didn't stay harmless, because Sade didn't just reconnect. She inserted herself everywhere.
Tunde.
Amara saw it the first time she visited unannounced. It wasn't something she normally did. Her life had always been too structured, too busy. But that day, something had nudged her. a feeling, a quiet instinct she had learned never to ignore. She found them at a restaurant, not just sitting together, but close, too close. Sade was laughing, head tilted slightly, hand resting lightly on Tunde's arm, as if it belonged there, and Tunde didn't move it. He didn't pull away. He didn't seem uncomfortable. He simply allowed it. When they noticed Amara, Sade's reaction was immediate. "Amara," she said brightly, her face lighting up with what looked like genuine excitement. Too genuine. Too quick. She stood, closing the distance between them before Amara could even fully process the scene. "You should have told us you were coming," Sade continued, her tone warm, almost affectionate. "We would have waited for you." Amara forced a small smile. "I didn't know you were here," she replied. Sade laughed lightly. "Oh, we just decided last minute. You know how he is," she added, gesturing playfully toward Tunde. Amara's eyes flickered to him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes the way it used to. And that was the moment something settled in her chest. Heavy, unwelcome, real. In public, Sade was everything a person could admire. Supportive, charming, effortlessly kind. She spoke highly of Amara to others. "Oh, her business is incredible. You should see how far she's come. She's so hardworking, honestly inspiring. I'm so proud of her." The words were perfect, delivered with the right tone, the right timing, the right expression. No one questioned her sincerity. No one could, except Amara, because in private, it was different, subtle at first. Small comments, wrapped in softness. "You're doing well, considering where you started. Tunde has really helped you, hasn't he? You're lucky he's so generous." Each sentence carefully constructed. Not enough to accuse, but enough to sting. Enough to remind. Enough to position. Amara never responded the way Sade expected. She didn't react emotionally, didn't lash out, didn't give her the satisfaction. She simply observed, stored, understood. But Sade's most effective tactic wasn't her words. It was her presence. Or rather, her control over Tunde's time. "Just for a bit," she would say, pulling him away. "Come with me. I need your help. It's important." And somehow, it always was. Important enough to delay plans. Important enough to cancel them. Important enough to make Amara wait. At first, Tunde apologized. "I'm sorry," he would say. "It won't happen again." But it did, again and again and again, until the apologies became shorter, less frequent, until they stopped altogether. Amara didn't confront him immediately. Not because she was afraid, but because she was watching, trying to understand, trying to see if what she felt was real, or if she was imagining something that wasn't there, but she wasn't. Because the distance grew, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, like two people walking in the same direction, slowly taking different paths without realizing it. Conversations became shorter, silences became longer. Moments that once felt full, now felt hollow. And through it all, Sade remained, constant, smiling, watching. One evening, after Tunde had cancelled plans again, Amara sat alone in her store, long after closing. The lights were dim, the street quieter than usual, and for the first time, in a long time, she allowed herself to feel it fully. The shift, the change, the truth. She wasn't losing him all at once. She was losing him in pieces. Small moments, missed calls, broken routines, unspoken distance. And the worst part? It wasn't loud. There was no clear moment she could point to and say, "This is where everything fell apart," because it hadn't fallen. It was being taken, slowly, carefully, deliberately. Amara leaned back in her chair, her eyes fixed on nothing. And in that quiet space, one thought surfaced clearly above the rest. She had been right. From the very beginning, Sade was not just a visitor, not just a friend, not just a passing presence. She was something else, something calculated, something patient, something dangerous. And now, without Amara even realizing when it truly began, she had started to succeed. Because the distance between Amara and Tunde was no longer a feeling. It was real and growing with every passing day. 5 years had a way of settling into a person's bones. Not loudly, not in ways that demanded attention, but in quiet, steady layers, days folding into weeks, weeks into years, until what once felt uncertain became routine, and what once raised questions became something easier to live with. Or at least, something easier to ignore.